Hey everyone, I don't think we're legally allowed to say hello friends. I'm Adam Kaufman. This is a special Masters edition of Pre-Lock Live on DKTV. If you haven't noticed, the run-up to Augusta tomorrow has been an awfully big deal around here, but while the Masters is a tradition unlike any other, so is Pre-Lock Live, and that's why we have a couple experts here to help you set your lineups. Pat Mayo and Geoff Ulrich, terrific analysts for us here at DraftKings year-round, but you might say they really shine on the links above all else. Both nominated for the Fantasy Sports Writers Association Golf Writer of the Year Award, and I'm happy to have them here with me tonight as usual. Gentlemen, biggest news of the day. Dustin Johnson, the world's top-ranked golfer and favorite to win this tournament, fell down the stairs this afternoon, hurt his lower back, and might not play tomorrow. I am not making this up. DJ is hoping to play, but guarantees, well, there are none as we talk right now. This is obviously brutal news for the sport, its fans, this tournament. Obviously Johnson, who absolutely torches the ball off the tee. He's been top 3 in driving distance every season since 2013. Not going to do that with a back injury. So fellas, welcome. And number one question, has this news shake up the dynamic of the field in terms of roster construction, especially since Johnson is the second most expensive play entering the tourney?
Well, I mean, it's going to push ownership on Jordan Spieth and Rory McIlroy up really high. I mean, I was already anticipating Rory McIlroy being perhaps even more highly owned than Dustin Johnson was even before this news. So I think right now Rory McIlroy is looking to be upwards of 40% owned in the big tournaments this week. And I think Jordan Spieth, who might have been coming in as like maybe a little bit under the radar, isn't going to be under the radar at all anymore. I think people are going to gravitate towards him. So I'm really looking towards a big bump on those two. It'll probably even trickle down to guys like Jason Day as well.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it, and I'm like, you know what? I didn't have a ton of Dustin Johnson to begin with. I had all Jordan Spieth. All I wanted was for potential sub 20% ownership on Jordan Spieth, and I'm just not getting it anymore. Dustin Johnson, I had projected to be around 35 to 37% owned in the Millionaire Maker. Rory around 28%, Spieth around 19%, and now Geoff's right. Like Rory's going to push 40. I do think that most people, if they didn't have Spieth in and they only had Dustin Johnson, that they're going to move more to Rory than to Spieth, but both are going to accumulate a lot of ownership here. And this also is going to push up the ownership of Ricky Fowler and Jon Rahm and Justin Rose as that second guy on your team. Now, everyone's ownership from that entire range is going to go up, but I can see those three guys in particular below $10,000 being the logical choice to put with either Rory or Spieth. And there's going to be a ton of Spieth-Rory lineups now, too.
All right, well, Pat, I mean, if Johnson does feel up to the competition, you know, I was going to say, and this is the question for both of you, will you go anywhere near him? But, I mean, clearly you weren't going near him even when he was presumed completely healthy. So, I mean, what's your view here for people out there that were looking at him that maybe are on the fence now?
Well, the big thing you need to know is that Dustin doesn't need to officially withdraw until his tee time. And if you look at the tee times, Dustin goes onto the course either last or second last. It's 2:53 p.m. So it's going to be well after lineup lock before you find out anything about Dustin Johnson. So for me, you're dealing with a guy who may or may not play, instantly killing any lineup you have. If he does withdraw, and he has a back injury, like that's not good. He's a golfer. These are hilly courses. The guy can barely walk. He's not going to be scaling up and down those undulations, all those big hills. So that's just another reason for me not to take him now. Game theory people and people playing a ton of lineups are, going to get Dustin Johnson at, I'm going to guess like 5%, because you're going to have the people that already put in their lineups and don't even hear about this. Those lineups are already set, so those are going to be the Dustin ones. Hell, Tiger's probably going to be 100%. He's 1%, and he's not even playing. So Dustin at 5 seems reasonable. So someone's going to make the argument that as a contrarian play, Dustin Johnson is really good in case he does play, and he's fine. And there is that possibility. It's just not a risk that I'm willing to take. But if you're a riskier type player than me, go for it.
Yeah, it really comes down to how much risk you want to take. Because like Pat said, he's got the late tee time. And also, we're going to touch on the weather, but it's not exactly going to be rosy the first 2 days. I mean, it's going to be cold, and it's going to be windy, and it's not exactly great weather for a guy with a back issue. So, yeah, you'll probably get Dustin Johnson at sub 10% ownership this week in the big Millie Maker, and maybe the guy can bounce back. We don't really know. The problem with the PGA, too, is this isn't the NBA. We don't have like questionable tags and probable and doubtful tags or like the NFL. We're just getting this information now. We're probably not going to get an update, like Pat said, until his tee time, which is the very last tee time. So a lot of guessing games involved. It really just comes down to how much risk do you want to take and how much reward do you see with rostering Dustin Johnson. He shakes it off. could be a great play. If he doesn't, yeah, you could get a big fat zero.
Well, for the next almost an hour, Pat and Geoff will be carrying me through this show, but we'd love to hear from you as well. If you have any questions, use the hashtag DKTV or leave a comment on YouTube, and our analysts will make sure to weigh in. Also, we do something pretty cool here at DraftKings. This is brand new. We're going to really expand upon it later on, but if you struggle in your 4-day contest, the full tournament, there's a weekend PGA option as well. But again, that's coming up later. And we'll continue to monitor this shocking, almost unbelievable Dustin Johnson news. We're with you until 8 o'clock Eastern. If you're just joining us, he fell today. That is the story in a statement from his manager. Hurt his back, may not be available for the Masters after 3 straight tourney wins for him. If you're curious, only 3 top-ranked golfers have ever missed a major since the start of world rankings 21 years ago. Those are Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods a few times, and Greg Norman as well. That goes all the way back until the late 1980s. Now, let's talk about the course at Augusta, Pat. For those that are new to golf or fantasy golf courses, they're like snowflakes. They're all different. So what kind of skill set is ideal for this course, you think?
Well, you want to be good. That helps. It's one of the harder courses going, but one where you can actually score. So you're going to see a major shift between guys going low and guys making really big numbers, because the greens are next to impossible to putt on, especially if you're a bad putter. Like for me, when I'm looking at skill sets, guys that are really good off the tee have a big advantage here to get to their proper spot and be able to attack some of these pins. But as the day goes along, and as Geoff already mentioned with the weather, that it could get super windy. So I think a lot of this around the green work, so strokes gained around the green, is going to prevent a lot of people from making big numbers. If you have a poor short game, that's not going to help at all. So when you have guys like Phil, guys like Kevin Knott, guys like Jordan Spieth or Jason Day, these guys, instead of chipping it on and having an 11-foot par putt, they're going to chip it on and have a 3-foot par putt. That is more than ideal. It turns double bogeys into pars, it turns triple bogeys into bogeys, and you save yourself. And if the weather is really going to pick up and hit these 35-mile-per-hour winds, you're going to need to save strokes where you can for the first 2 days. And then it's about your tee work. It's about attacking the pins. But the first 2 days, you want bogey avoidance and short game guys. And frankly, I don't really like to rely on course history a lot, but there is a local knowledge that people need to have of this course if they're going to excel. It's not uniform in every case. That doesn't mean a first-timer cannot do well. When you look at the winners, there has not been a first-time winner since 1979. And I think there's a good reason for that. And you're going to see Fred Couples play well for at least a round, because he knows off the tee where he needs to put the ball to get the proper roll, to attack the pin, where to miss even on these approach shots, because sometimes it's better to be off the green than putting from the wrong tier. That's what leads to these big numbers, and these guys with experience at Augusta can really overcome that easily.
Geoff, the weather, you talked about it a little bit already. It's already impacted the lead up to round 1 with practice rounds and the like. How's the forecast look tomorrow? What kind of effect should that have, especially as you think about maybe staggering things a little bit with those tee times throughout the day?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick update on the weather here. I mean, it's really kind of a tale of two halves of this golf tournament. Thursday and Friday are supposed to be windy and gusts up to 30 miles per hour. It's also supposed to be cold in the morning, starting at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's the first 2 days. And Saturday and Sunday looks nice, but for us on the full slate of golf here, we really got to think about stacking tee times. It looks like it's going to be a little bit lower winds Thursday morning. Now, they're still going to get cold temperatures, so I don't know how much it's going to help, but the gusts should be lower. And look, we're always guessing a little bit with the weather too, but if I'm looking at it right now, Thursday AM might have the best chance of some low winds. So you could think about stacking some tournament lineups just with AM only players on Thursday. And some big names that are going out a little bit earlier: Ricky Fowler, Jordan Spieth, Hideki Matsuyama, Justin Rose. Got Russell Henley on the very first tee time. You can think about him too. I like him, but overall, it's going to be windy for the first 2 days. Looks like it could be a little bit more gustier Thursday afternoon. That looks like it's going to be the worst time. Friday, same thing, a little less winds, but still windy all day. So really got to think about a little bit of strategy coming in. I think stacking might be a play. I don't know what Pat thinks, but for me right now, it's looking like the Thursday AM might be the play.
Yeah, I'm looking at Thursday AM as well, but I want to make sure this is still weather we're talking about here. We can be wrong about this. So I think that if you're going to stack, when I made my lineups, I did triple the amount of AM PM stacks. That's AM Thursday stacks with those players than I did of PM only. But I did take a few of those just to leverage myself against the field should everything shift. Because I think that the popular sentiment right now that if you are going to stack a tee time, it's going to be the AM tee time. And the big thing, you hit on it for me, is really the cold, because the wind's going to be around all day, both days. There's bigger gusts in the PM on Thursday, but it's going to be really cold Friday morning, and then it heats up throughout the day. Not to say that, they're in Hawaii come Thursday morning, but it's not, frosty like it's going to be on Friday. And that's what concerns me the most, especially for going back to Dustin Johnson. If he does play, he's going to be out there with a stiff back and, like you said, 40 Fahrenheit degree weather. It's funny that I have to say Fahrenheit. If I say Celsius, no one knows how. Like 3 degrees Celsius for anyone watching internationally. And that's not good. That's not optimal golf weather. That's the same weather that I play in April in Canada when I hit the links. And I'll tell you, it's a bit stiff out there.
Yeah, just the last thing on that.
Sure.
I think Pat makes a good point, though. It is the weather, and we're not really sure. So, like, if you're making a lot of lineups, I mean, making stacks of both probably isn't a bad idea. I would definitely go heavier on the Thursday AM, but try and have some exposure to another tee time, too.
Well, let's get to our first spotlight here, and as usual in Pre-Lock Live, studs, the high-priced talents you want to start your lineups with. And remember, you have 6 spots for this tournament, the usual $50 grand to spend. We flashed you at that graphic just a moment ago. You could see all these guys right here: Jordan Spieth, Rory McIlroy, Jason Day, Hideki Matsuyama, and Ricky Fowler as well. Spieth is the highest-priced guy on the slate or on the in the field. He would have been regardless, even if Dustin Johnson does play. Still got him by a few $100. Johnson originally we had in this group, had to knock him out obviously because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. I want to hit on each and every one of these guys at least a little bit, fellas, here, and you can see the breakdown here, cuts, how many they've made, obviously, their average that they come in terms of the fantasy points, along with the prices, and if you happen to care, where they're from as well. But let's build on this, Pat and Geoff. Let's bring these guys back here. The Spieth, first and foremost, he's going to be considered among the favorites. But how much, Geoff, you can start, how much do you weigh course history when it comes to Jordan Spieth?
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Spieth has the best average score at this course over anyone in the field, and it's actually by quite a bit. It's sub 70, so you definitely weigh that a lot. Jordan Spieth isn't really coming in great form. I mean, he hasn't had a top 10 since Pebble Beach, I think. So I personally, I was gravitating towards Dustin Johnson and getting some exposure to guys like Ricky Fowler and Justin Rose before this Dustin Johnson news. But, now that Dustin Johnson is out and Jordan Spieth has a good tee time, I'm probably going to have to get me some Jordan Spieth. I've faded him at the last couple of Masters. It hasn't worked out. I think he's a guy that you definitely want some exposure to. And again, with no Dustin Johnson in the field and Rory McIlroy being probably so highly owned tomorrow, I think getting a little bit of exposure to Jordan Spieth makes sense. I personally don't pick him as the winner this week, but I do think that push came to shove, I would take him over Rory McIlroy right now.
Pat, how about you?
I'm all in on Jordan. I mean, I'm not all in because I don't have him in 100% of my lineups, but I have him in around 75% of my lineups. And that was before the DJ news. Now with his ownership going up, I'm actually up mine because I want to be massively overweight. Jordan is my pick to win. He's the guy that I'm starting all my teams with. And just because he's going to be chalk at the top, I don't care. You need to have the winner in your lineup if you have any chance of taking down one of these giant GPPs. And if I think he's going to win, I got to go all in on the guy. So I think it does create an interesting opportunity if you don't want to take Spieth or Rory, because most people are going to have one of those two guys. If both of them bottom out, you could build a very contrarian lineup full of great players pretty easily by just avoiding those two.
Well,
Yeah.
Hideki, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's a really good point Pat just made, that you have to have the winner in your lineup. So we talk about ownership, but if you think Rory McIlroy is going to win this week, then don't worry if he's 50% or 40% owned. Just play him and play him overweight. I just feel the same way about Ricky Fowler this week. I'm going to have him in almost all of my lineups because I think he's, of the top 5 players we got up there, I think he's coming in the best form. I think he sets up well for the scores. He's got course history. So when we're talking about studs, I don't worry so much about ownership. You can find lower-owned players later on. Now, you were going to say Hideki Matsuyama's name, weren't you, Kaufman? That's a player out of these 5 guys who might not get the ownership bump. He hasn't been playing too well. So if you're looking for a low-owned stud, he's probably it.
Well, Geoff, we can stay with you. I was going to bring up Hideki as well as Rory. I mean, both of these guys, when you're thinking about the fact that, I mean, they can both strike the ball, but a little weak, obviously, on the green, does, the ability to really hammer the hell out of the ball make up for that weakness? Is that something you're willing to overlook?
I mean, we've seen good ball strikers with with poor short games do well at the Masters. I mean, Adam Scott won. He's basically the same kind of player. So it worries me from the sense of I'd rather have a guy like Jordan Spieth or Jason Day if it came down to it, but it doesn't mean that Rory McIlroy can't win this week or put up a monster performance. So you do kind of look past it. You weigh everything. The winners here have generally been really good in scrambling for the week. But again, it's kind of one of those variables that can, alter week to week statistically. Rory's got the game to get it done. Push come to shove, like I said, I'd rather go with Ricky or Jordan this week. But, you do have to kind of look at that both Hideki and Rory as it's a weakness of their game.
Pat, does Ricky's history in majors and certainly at the Masters at Augusta last year, does that concern you at all?
Yeah, I'm not using Ricky Fowler. I'm using Hideki. Hideki's the one that I want to go with here. I like Hideki more than I like Rory. That might be foolish of me because Rory comes in with the much better form. But the one thing that people need to know about Hideki, he's very similar to Rory in a lot of ways. No, the approach isn't as good. And when Rory is dialed in, he's the best player in the world. That doesn't happen all that often. And the poor form for Hideki right now is worrisome. But the big difference between the two is, no, neither is a great putter. But Hideki is masterful around the green. Rory is not. And that's where Hideki's going to save himself this week. We saw it in the conditions last year. Wasn't that big of a deal. He turned out a top 10. He's had a top 10 here the last 2 years. And this is not quite at the peak of his powers of how he was playing. That was earlier in the year. But he's been showing he can close. So if he's there, I'm not worried about him. And as Geoff mentioned, he might not get the ownership required. So instead of going Fowler or going Rory, it's Hideki for me here with a sprinkle on Jason Day.
How about some roster construction talk? I mean, when you're talking about 50 grand, granted 6 spots to fill, but some of these guys, these studs that we were just looking at, and if you want, you can look at the guys that we were just talking about again in terms of their prices. Are they cheap enough? They're all expensive, don't get me wrong, but are they cheap enough where you consider maybe rostering 2 out of your top 3, let's say, and filling in around them with value or bargain bin type guys, or are you looking for a little more balance, you think, Geoff?
I wouldn't, before this Dustin news, I wasn't planning on making any Jordan and Dustin lineups, but I think you can pair pretty much any of the other two and get away with it without having to go too deep. So there's still really good players at 69, 6,800. Even some of the players at 6,500, they're not your typical guys you trust in this tournament, but with the weather the way it is and some of the sketchy things that might be going on the first 2 days with draw bias and stuff like that, a guy like Daniel Summerhays could have a good tournament. A guy like Sean O'Hare, it wouldn't really shock me that much, to be honest. So I do think he can get away. It never
shocks you if Sean O'Hare does well.
What's that?
You are on Sean O'Hare every week.
Every week. I know. I had to. Well, I only brought him up once. This is the last time we'll talk about him. Hopefully. Probably not. But he's played well in bad weather before, and he's only 65. He's played here before, too. This is like his 7th Masters appearance. So anyways, you can get away with it. I think that roster-wise, pairing like Ricky and Jordan Spieth will get you more savings, and if you're going like with just Rory and Jordan, but you can definitely get away with it this week.
This is taking me back to matchups breakdown. I missed the 2 of you guys together. It's fun. Pat, same question to you about the lineup construction. Would you consider maybe rostering 2 of these guys and then filling in around them?
I wouldn't even consider doing it. I mean, I am doing it, and I think everyone else is doing it too, because the pricing is soft enough that there's enough value in that high $6,000 level. You don't even need to dip down to the losers like Sean O'Hare, like Jeff's talking about. You can go to Adam Hadwin or Kevin Kisner or Fleetwood or Ross Fisher or Mark Leishman. Like, there's enough guys down there. Whoever you like, you can find 3 of them. That's not that big of a deal. And then you still have enough money to buy someone like the high 7s, low 8s if you really want to. So I actually think that the majority of people are going to build their lineups that way, whether it's Spieth Rory, whether it's Spieth Ricky Fowler, Rory Ricky Fowler, Spieth Rahm, Rory Rahm, that kind of thing. You're going to see a lot of those lineups. So like I mentioned before, that if you just want to get rid of like the top 2 guys and start your teams either with Ricky and make him your highest price guy, or with Hideki and make him your highest price guy, I think you're opening your lineups up to not be duplicated, to really have decent upside, especially if the top guys falter, and you'll have a very unique lineup and be able to build it more balanced. I do have a few lineups like that, but generally speaking, I do have top 2 kind of with so much Jordan Spieth, it's almost inevitable that it goes that way for me.
Masters starts tomorrow at Augusta. Of course, the first of 4 days, and some weekend golf for you as well, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. We welcome your questions with the hashtag DKTV on Twitter. Get them to our analysts very clearly. If you've been listening to the first 20, 25 minutes of the show, these guys know what they're talking about. They talk golf, they read golf, they write about golf. It's pretty much what they do. They just probably wish they had more time to actually go out and golf. You can leave your questions there with the video on YouTube as well. We see some familiar names and faces in there. Don't hesitate to chime in. We're looking right at you. All right, time for our first chase fade here. Let's bring these guys on the wall behind me and really dance into this thing. The way chase fade works is each of these guys are going to have 15 seconds to debate their point. I will give them a topic and they can react accordingly right from there. Pat on the right, Geoff here on my left, and probably getting you all backwards if you're watching on camera, obviously. But the first chase fade for you fellas here is Jordan Spieth. His recent form and big salary, again, that is $11,500, makes him too risky to roster this weekend. Geoff, have the honors.
I'll fade it. And look, my view on Spieth sort of changes a little bit with Dustin Johnson being out, but before, with him being the most expensive, I just feel like Dustin was the play. And quite frankly, I'd still rather have Ricky Fowler, who's coming in with better form, at 9,300, or even Jason Day at just over 10,000. So yeah, I think Spieth is still an okay play, but I'm going to pick.
All right, Pat.
I'm chasing him. I think he's going to win. He's the guy that I want. I'd use up the rest of the 15 seconds to tell you why you need to play Jordan Spieth at the Masters. I have a note next to my desk after I faded Jordan Spieth at last year's Masters that just said, quit being an idiot, stop fading Jordan Spieth at the Masters. So I'm not going to do it. Play Jordan Spieth. He's the guy you want.
All right, seems like an easy enough, a confident point, so we can go with Pat right there, really owning that. Whether it pays off for him, we'll certainly find out. We'll give him a 1-0 lead here. We'll be doing, 4, maybe 5 of these things over the course of the next half hour or so that we have here, doing the Masters edition of Pre-Lock Live. All right, let's go to our second chase fade, and that is avoiding the top 3 studs is a viable play for bigger tournaments this week. Pat, start us off.
Yes, I'm actually going to chase that. I think it is a viable strategy, but not one you really want to employ if you're only playing like 5 lineups or something like that. If you play enough, allocate around 15 to 20% of your lineups and avoid the top 2 guys and build that balance. Just because if it breaks the other way and Jordan and Rory don't win, then you really X'd out so much of the field you get to reap the rewards.
Geoff?
I'll fade it just from the perspective of, even if one of those 3 big guys don't win, I still think they're going to come so highly or put up such a big fantasy total through bonuses and stuff like that that they're going to be a must play. So I'm going to fade it just from the perspective of you're probably going to need one of them to win a big GPP.
All right. Good work by these guys. Geoff can even it up there. If you guys happen to disagree with either of these fellas, disagree with me, that's perfectly fine as well. You can leave your opinion with that hashtag DKTV on Twitter or get involved in the video chat on YouTube as well. And again, the questions are welcome. Just to give you an idea what those look like, let's throw one up on the screen here because it's going to be relevant to some of the stuff we're getting to here. By Robert, what are your thoughts on Jon Rahm in his first trip to Augusta? Well, Rahm is part of our next spotlight. That is the value spotlight, the fellows who would make the good complementary additions to support your stud or studs if you'd opt, again, to stack. We can show you some of the options here coming up on the wall behind me. Once again, it's a good group of a handful of guys, one of those being Jon Rahm at $8,600 from Spain. And, as we bring up the list, let's go right back to you guys here. Geoff, you could start us off talking about Jon Rahm and, take on Robert's question here.
Yeah, I mean, Jon Rahm's a guy who obviously has shown through the start of 2017 that he can win pretty much any tournament he enters. I mean, he won at Torrey Pines earlier, which is an event newcomers don't do well at. So that gives you your first clue that this guy is the real deal. Most newcomers I'm very, very skeptical on. I'm not really that skeptical on Jon Rahm. Now, look, I kind of want to fade him this week just because of the blow up and the hype, but I don't think that that's necessarily the right play. Before this Dustin Johnson news, I was more scared of fading Jon Rahm than I was of Dustin Johnson. So he's only 8,600. He does not have to win the tournament necessarily for him to be a huge play in GPPs. He's just good at everything. I really think that he might not win the tournament, but he's going to put up a big performance this week. So really is probably the best value on the board, too, when you look what he's done so far this year.
Pat, what do you think? You seem quizzical.
Yeah, listen, I think everything Geoff said is pretty accurate about Jon Rahm, but he's not a player that I'm going to be going with this week simply because his ownership is going to be out of control. And if you take someone, let's say like Louis Oosthuizen, for example, who is just below him in the pricing and actually has a bit of a better draw than Rahm does. So if we project out something like, let's say Louis' ownership is 10%, and Rahm's is probably going to be like 22 to 25%. Is it 2.5 times more likely that Rahm beats Louis? I don't think so. So I feel good about my fade on Jon Rahm and moving to that guy. Could I be wrong? Could he put up a great performance like we've seen all year, like Geoff said? Yeah, I think we can. And he was right. He doesn't need to win to be a valuable part of a winning team this week. Just because the positioning points, they're valuable. Rahm's going to be putting up a lot of DraftKings points. He makes a lot of birdies. He has eagle potential. And he's just one of those guys, almost like Justin Thomas in a weird way. But Justin Thomas is another guy who's in this range that I would just rather go with than Rahm and just maybe X out a quarter of the field if he doesn't show up at his first time at the Masters, which guys don't have a great history with.
Yeah, I think from a tournament perspective, that 8K range is going to be really interesting. I think Oosthuizen and Thomas are probably the pivots I would go off of as well. I just have a question for Pat. Do you think Phil Mickelson is going to be more owned than Rahm? And I mean, I'm off Phil. I think he's the guy you want to fade at this range personally. But ownership-wise, what do you think?
I think they're going to be around even. I, too, would rather have Rahm than Phil. But it's funny because when you look at a normal week of DraftKings golf versus like a millionaire maker when it's opened up to a lot more casual people coming in, and someone mentioned this to me, Phil is the uncle pick. So, yeah, your dad's playing the Masters this week as people know the Masters and they want to come in and they want to play something. And they're going to like, oh, I know Phil. I'll take Phil. Screw these young guys. I want the old guy. And I think that is going to boost up his ownership. And it's not like Phil is a bad play by any means. So it's one of these things where I don't think he's going to win. I'll fade him. I'll fade Rahm and take the other guys in that range. Again, this is a strategy that just might blow up in my face, but hopefully it doesn't.
All right, well, you can see the guys once again that we're talking about here in terms of a value spotlight. We'll show you the graphic. You can see some more information on these guys. Rahm, obviously, I mean, so anonymous, doesn't even have a headshot. Tyrell Hatton as well, Bill Haas, Adam Hadwin, Francesco Molinari from Italy as well. As far as a guy like Hadwin, for instance, does the recent form for him, you think, make him perhaps a better play than a veteran like Bill Haas or Matt Kuchar, guys who have had a solid record at Augusta already, Geoff?
I think Adam Hadwin's just playing really, really well, and he's a player that, especially with the weather concerns and stuff like that being a factor, that I would just overlook the fact he doesn't have a lot of experience playing, or doesn't have any experience playing at Augusta. That being said, there are some players in his range I kind of prefer who do have experience, and Bill Haas is definitely one of them. I'm really big on Bill Haas. Haas is a player who has not really done much in majors, but he did get his first top 10 in the Open Championship last year. He's actually top five finishes in 2 of the last WGC events as well. So I like Bill Haas a lot. I also like Kevin Kisner in that range. Hadwin's probably just going to be a little bit more popular than I think he should be for a guy who's playing Augusta the first time. That being said, let's give him some props. A, he's Canadian, and B, he's absolutely been on fire. So I don't think it's a bad play. I just see a few other plays in that range that I'm personally going to be on.
Never before have I felt so outnumbered. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Team Canada with Hadwin as well.
Weird.
But I do think he is going to be popular. He and Kisner at that $6,900 range are going to be exceptionally popular. So if you want to make the case that you don't feel great about Adam Hadwin, I would say don't play any of them. I think he's actually going to play pretty well. I think he's a very good value. I'm trying not to go too heavy in on him because I don't think it's smart to push all in on guys in this range. There's a reason that they're $6,900. These are not the best players in the world. These are players, 30 to 60. These guys can have blowups, and with no experience for Hadwin, I wouldn't go any more than 30% of him in my lineup. But I think his ownership is going to be like 15 to 20%. Kisner too, and like Geoff mentions Bill Haas. I'm off Bill Haas here. Like I like him in real life. And I think that he could finish T13 or even T9, something like that. But that's best case scenario for him. He's not winning, and he doesn't make birdies. He doesn't make a ton of bogeys, but he has that Jim Furyk type score that he's not the sort of player that I want for DraftKings scoring. I much prefer the guy that goes out and makes a birdie, then makes a bogey, and that's how he's even, not 2 pars in a row. I want that scoring. I want that eagle potential. And Bill Haas just does not bring that to the table.
No, I get it. I mean, I like Pierce Dietrich a lot as a person, but if I'm putting together a fantasy team of analysts, for instance, am I willing to spend? Am I willing to think about that? All right, let's take our next question. I don't know if it'll come from Pierce, but something tells me he may be paying attention to the show. Here it is on Twitter from John Golf 45. Shane Lowry or Lee Westwood? I know at the very least we'll be chatting a little bit about Westwood later on, but let's hit on this now. Geoff, what do you think?
Oh, man. I guess I'm going to go Lee Westwood. He really does not have a good record in final rounds of majors, but his record at Augusta is just too hard for me to ignore. So I'll say Westwood, although Lowry's an interesting low-owned candidate this week.
Yeah, Lowry's one of my favorite guys this week. I think you're going to get him at probably max 3% ownership if the conditions get really windy. He's actually a pretty good player in terrible conditions, as is Lee Westwood. I don't want to just throw out Lee Westwood. He's not personally one of my favorite guys. I think he's going to be over-owned in this range, even though he had a terrible week at the Shell Houston Open about 5-ish days ago when he didn't make the cut and was 38 over. And that doesn't matter. It's Lee Westwood. It's the Masters. He's going to show up and play somewhat well. In fact, he might even be in contention until at the end of Saturday. Then he'll shoot 85 on Sunday like he always does, because that's a Lee Westwood thing to do. But for upside purposes, scoring purposes, Shane Lowry rates out really well. He doesn't have that super high finish so far this season, but statistically, especially off the tee and strokes gained tee to green, he's just up there with the big guys, like your Dustins, with your Spieths, with your Rorys. He's inside the top 20 in that, and I think that really carries a lot of weight, just like he does. He does carry a lot of weight. Maybe those hills will get to him. He'll get too tired and he can't play. I don't know. But he's won the Bridgestone. We saw him, compete to the very end with Dustin last year at the U.S. Open. He shows up in these big-time tournaments. So I really like Shane Lowry.
That you have concerning PGA events come up. In fact, let's get right to that now. We'll, maybe fix some room for that question a little bit later on. Now, I mentioned earlier, DraftKings is very excited to introduce weekend golf for PGA events because the first, obviously being, this is the Masters, so clearly we're amped up about that. Basically, if you had a rough opening 2 rounds, you get a second chance to focus specifically on Saturday and Sunday after the cut Friday night. One big difference: no finishing bonus, because if you don't make the cut, you don't really finish. You can see some of the scoring differentials up there, the points that are different that are in yellow. That means that the points are different in the weekend competition, Saturday, Sunday, than they are when you're filling out your teams right now. So these guys have taken a look at that. They're certainly familiar with the parameters of weekend golf. Pat, start with you. Other than some of the stuff that I've been rambling about, what should we know?
I think if you're strategically, when you're looking at this, with no finishing points, taking a lot of the guys that just made the cut, who it could blow up in your face because these guys technically have nothing to play for if they're out of it, but they're generally the types of guys that make the big moves when the pressure's off, you get to go out early, and if the earlier wave is in better conditions, then you go and look at it. So that would be my first impression on it, and obviously continue just to take birdie makers, because making birdies and eagles is now way more valuable with no finishing points.
Yeah, I don't want to emphasize the weather too much again. Don't want to turn people into meteorologists, but looking at the weather for Saturday morning, if the Saturday, and it happens a lot on the weekend, the Saturday morning crew goes out early, they all play fast, and they often get to play with 0 wins. So, like Pat said, looking for those big names who maybe just snuck through the cut and then targeting those players, because that's often what happens. And also, when you're looking at the front of the leaderboard, don't go heavy on those players who often choke when they're in good positions. And I'm talking about guys like maybe Andrew Looper or someone like that. These players often have good Thursdays and Fridays, and then they kind of crumble. So you can look at players' scoring records too over rounds. That's a tool to look at. But yeah, without the placement points, definitely more weighted on birdies and eagles too.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, and Pat, you can keep going with some of the names. Who's some of the guys that people maybe want to stay away from because they do tend to fade if they have an early lead, or guys who maybe aren't used to having a lead and could choke, could get a little nervous in the last couple of days of the tournament?
I mean, that's almost everyone who's not an elite player right now. I mean, we witnessed it firsthand when we saw Kisner jump out to that lead at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. He just started getting the yips. For a guy who has an immaculate short game, guy couldn't chip anymore. Guy couldn't make a putt anymore. The guy who hits the ball down the middle of the fairway was putting it in the woods. Like, the pressure gets to these guys. So if you see some of these names that are up there, expect them to play more conservatively too. Like, very few people with a 3-stroke lead are going to go pin seeking. They're going to try to hit the fairway and make par. Fairway, green, 2-putt, par, moving on. And that's not good for DraftKings scoring. The guys that need to catch up are the ones that are really going to lead your team to victory here. So like Geoff said, like, if you can get Rory on, Saturday and Sunday and he's like 12 back, dial up some Rory because he's going low.
I know you can find a bunch of stats, Geoff, on PGAtour.com. You can people, if you want to put in the research, you want to put in the time, and seemingly, obviously, if you're, putting in the effort to do these contests, you're willing to do that, to do your research, you can find out. You can look and see who historically tends to do well on the weekend. Obviously, if they've made the cut in the past, be it at this tournament, on this course, or elsewhere, who typically has good Saturdays, good Sundays. Geoff, how much attention are you paying to that?
I mean, it's something I'm definitely going to look up because there are players who just, they just play better on Saturday after they make the cut. John Peterson's actually a really good example this year. The guy's like first or second in Saturday scoring for whatever reason. He's stuck by the cut a couple times. He's thrown out like a couple 63s or 64s on Saturday. So I'm not saying play John Peterson every week, but he's a good example of a player who can sometimes do that. And there's opposites too. A guy like Brandon Steele doesn't have the greatest Sunday scoring record. So yeah, it's something to look up. It's something you can research, which is nice. And I think it's a great strategy component of the new offering anyways.
All right, so Pat, clearly, I mean, we're talking about the weather, we're talking about who's typically good on the weekend. Going beyond that, or maybe it's just that, you tell me, how's it going to differ for weekend golf lineup building as compared to putting a lineup together right now when you have the whole field in front of you?
I mean, you still want to have the best guys. As rudimentary as that sounds, you want to have guys that score on par 5, score on par 4s, even if their bogey rate is a little bit higher. Again, with the no finishing points, that is not so important anymore. So the birdie makers that are behind in the field would be the guys that I personally would be loading up on. But, talk to me again in 3 weeks after I played it a few times, and maybe I'll be singing a different tune. But initially, that seems like the strategy to me.
All right, well, let's move on to our next spotlight here, and that is Horses for Courses. I like the name of this one. If you don't know what it means, it's actually pretty simple. Guys who have had success at Augusta in the past. So we're going to take a look at some of these names here, show them to you. They're going to come up on the board right behind me. Boom, there they go. Justin Rose, Phil Mickelson, been talking all about lefty, obviously. Bubba Watson, Matt Kuchar, Lee Westwood. We've spent some time on him as well, so we won't necessarily hit on all of these guys individually, unless these guys want to. We bring back Geoff and Pierce, and we'll show you the full screen graphic as well with all the different information that you have on these guys, the options that from pricing to their history in terms of cuts and made and average scores and all of that different stuff. We'll give it to you, I promise. You can see it right there. Obviously, it's Mickelson is the leader when it comes to this particular group anyway, but you also have to pay up for him a little bit. Why don't we start with lefty here? Geoff, Pat liked to call him, your uncle's pick. How do you feel about Mickelson here?
He's just going to be too popular. And look, Phil's pushing 47. I know he's got the course history. He could top 10 here. He could make a bunch of birdies. He's just not for me. There's just too many other elite players in this field. There's too many other elite players that are a lot less expensive than Phil this week. So, when I look at the course history, I think the guy that really sticks out is Justin Rose. And I'm sure Justin Rose will be popular, but he's a hard fade for me this week. 9 of 9 cuts at this event. Runner-up to Jordan Spieth in 2015. I believe it was T10 last year. He's a tough fade this week, and I do like Ricky Fowler at 9,300. I think he's got more winning upside than Justin Rose, but Justin Rose is a very, very consistent player. He'd be a guy I'd probably start cash games with this week. And he's played well in 2017. It's not like he's been playing poorly. He's got a couple top fives. So do I think Justin Rose is going to win the tournament? No. Do I think you should play him in your 50-50 in cash game lineups? Yeah, absolutely. Going down the list, I talked about Westwood. He's not a must-play for me, but again, I do recognize the course history. Matt Kuchar, kind of the same deal. Bubba's the interesting one of this group for me. He could put it together for a big week. He's probably going to be 5 or 10% owned in GPPs. So definitely someone to at least think about.
And yeah, basically for me, I'm a lot on the same page with Geoff here. I don't really have Phil. I have a little bit of Bubba, although I hate his draw and I hate where his game's at right now. It's very minimal exposure to Bubba Watson, but I'll be feeling like such an idiot if Bubba's just out there on the course Sunday. He's winning by 3. Like, it wouldn't stun me to see that happen. It would stun me if that was to happen to Phil. Rose, I'm in on. I don't care how chalky he is. I think Justin Rose plays really well this week, and I'm not on Kuchar or Westwood. Like, they're fine. You can use them if you want to. They're just personally not for me. There are other guys in that range that I like more.
Geoff, Westwood's coming off a bad start. You willing to overlook recent history?
Here's the thing about Westwood. First of all, I think he will be popular this week. Like Pat said, people know his history here and stuff like that. There's just so many strong plays in that range, and we can talk about them a little bit now. But a guy who won last week, Russell Henley at 7,200. You want to talk about a guy who statistically is up there with the elite players right now. It's him. He's top 10 putter, drives it really well off the tee, and he's played this course before. So I don't have an issue with Westwood. I definitely value experience. But, for me, Russell Henley is just a better player, and I think he's got a little bit more upside this week. Westwood's just proven too many times in major championships that he just can't really put 4 rounds together anymore. So I don't know if he ever could, quite frankly, but I don't trust him too this week anyways. So I just think there's too many strong plays in that range personally for me to roster him.
All right, well, let's go to our next group of Chase Fades. I know we have at least a couple here with Pat and Geoff, so far, each of them with 1 victory. If you happen to just be joining us, the way this works, once again, they each get 15 seconds. Chase or fade means you support something or you're against it, if that wasn't self-explanatory enough. Let's do the first here, fellas. Henrik Stenson, a potential low ownership, makes him a great GPP target this weekend. Pat, start us off.
Yeah, you're not wrong about the low ownership, but no, he is not a GPP target for me. He's not a cash game target for me. He's a guy that I would like to target. If I could see people's head-to-head matchups and they told me they were rostering Stenson, I'd go take that action right away. I just don't see it. His game is out of sync. We've seen him play poorly at courses where he always plays well. No thanks.
All right, Geoff, you're grinning like a fool. What's up?
I'm just grinning because I am going to say that now with the Dustin Johnson news, I kind of feel like Henrik Stenson might be a viable GPP target. No, I'm just talking about big tournaments. He's going to be under 5% owned. Everyone hates this guy after he's completely failed them at his 2 favorite courses. It seems like a fine bounce back spot, but I don't know. He's very risky, but I'll still chase him as a low owned GPP target.
All right, I'm going with Pat mainly because I don't think you believe the words that are coming out of your mouth. So if you didn't sell me, you're not going to sell these people. Let's do our next Chase Fade, see if Geoff can even this thing up here. This is the week that Brooks Koepka gets back on track with a top 10 finish at Augusta. Geoff.
I'll chase Brooks here. He has shown progressive form at this tournament. He's 33rd, I believe, a couple years ago, and I believe he was top 25 last year. And that's nice because it was bad weather last year, and it's going to be bad weather this year. He's got a ton of length off the tee. At the very least, he's going to be able to probably get you an eagle or 2 this week. So I'm definitely going to chase a bounce back. I don't think he's going to win, but I definitely chase it as a play.
No, let's fade Brooks Koepka here. Brooks Koepka has been awful all year. He had 2 good rounds at the match play. My Twitter blows up being like, oh, are we getting on Brooks for the Masters? Is Brooks back? It's 2 rounds. He didn't even make it to the next round. It was unbelievable how quickly people are to forgive Brooks Koepka, despite the fact that he's playing like garbage. Fade for me, not a question.
All right, we'll let the people decide. See what you think. I'm inclined to go with Pat, though, with that last one, which, Geoff doesn't like. You see the head check. You can weigh in with the hashtag DKTV on Twitter. You can get involved as well in the video chat on YouTube. Let us know how you think these guys are doing. Are they convincing you? Listen, you have 2 of the best fantasy golf minds on the planet. On the planet. I'm not exaggerating that. These guys are award nominated. The winner couldn't make it, I guess. I'm assuming, guys. Was that the? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. They're awesome. They're awesome. Award nominated. And when it comes to fantasy golf writing, these guys are among the best you'll find. So clearly, if you've been paying attention the first however long it's been, 45 minutes, they know what they're talking about. If you have the questions, get involved. Hashtag DKTV. We will get to them. But let's continue on. Before our next spotlight, which is the Fantasy Golf Millionaire Targets, I want to just let's reset this thing a little bit for anyone that joined us late as it concerns Dustin Johnson, because we keep alluding to the fact after our expansive chat at the beginning that Johnson's out. If anyone, or maybe out. Let me emphasize that. We don't know officially and won't probably know, as these guys mentioned, until potentially right before his tee time, which is one of the last or second last tomorrow. If you are just joining us, though, the news: he fell around 3 o'clock Eastern this afternoon in his rental home down a flight of stairs, landed badly, injured his lower back. He has been basically immobilized in hopes that he is feeling better for the tournament tomorrow. Whether he plays or not, we don't know. It's a guess, and therefore it's a guess for you as to whether you want to roster this guy. And unfortunately, you need to make the decision before he ultimately would tee off. But again, bad back, you may just want to stay away from the guy anyway. But Pat, let's go back to you on this one. Just how risky a sort of proposition is this for people considering the health of Dustin Johnson?
It is the riskiest proposition you can make, because it's like you mentioned, if he withdraws before his tee time, which you're not going to know because that's not till later in the day, so after lock, if you have him on your team is not winning anything this week. You're going to be towards the bottom of the standings. That, for me, is personally too much risk. Like I mentioned before, if you're playing a lot of lineups and you're willing to, light some on fire by having Dustin Johnson and the potential of him withdrawing, you're going to get him at low ownership. I understand the play. It's just personally not one I'm going to make.
Geoff, what do you think?
Yeah, sorry, pretty much on the same page. I mean, you can always throw it out there as like a low ownership GPP. I'm the only one who's going to have Dustin Johnson now, but it just does not sound good. I mean, they obviously came out today and they made it a huge thing. If it wasn't a big deal, he probably wouldn't have heard anything about it, because the PGA doesn't necessarily report injuries. So the fact Dustin's making a statement about it, I would put his percentage of playing or at least completing this tournament at probably under 50%, just based on that alone. Also, I come back to the weather again. It's going to be cold the first 2 days, so even if he does play, he's not going to be probably feeling very well swinging in the cold weather. I just think it's too risky for me. I'm not even going to touch it.
Does it surprise either of you guys, Pat? You can go here if you'd like. Just the fact that Geoff just alluded to it, that a statement came out so quickly. This news wasn't broken by a golf writer who's in Augusta or anything like that. I mean, this was a quick and efficient and brief, to the point, succinct, unlike my statement here, message from his manager. I mean, does it seem odd to you at all?
Yeah, it feels like something's up. What it is, I don't know. Are we looking at a Tiger situation? I don't know. Just throwing that out there. But I'm glad they told us. I mean, actually, I'm not glad, because I didn't have a ton of Dustin Johnson anyway. So it actually would have benefited me more if they hadn't said anything, if people got stuck with Dustin in their lineup. But having this news out, can you imagine what the reaction would have been if nothing was said, and right before he goes to walk onto the course, they're like, oh yeah, Dustin got hurt yesterday, he can't play. How outraged people would be about that. So it's a good thing for everyone that this happened now, not this time tomorrow.
Yeah, it sucks for Dustin, obviously, but it's good for us that we're talking about it now and not tomorrow, because it would have been awful. But it's a very strange timing and stuff like that. It could just be nothing. It could just be, maybe he did fall down a flight of stairs. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens tomorrow now.
As a golf fan, just removing even the fantasy element of it, because, I mean, I'm with you. I'm glad this news came out when it did, because this thing happens tomorrow morning and all of a sudden this entire show is mostly rendered useless. That's not good for anybody. But just as a golf fan, if there's no Dustin Johnson, it's the same debate we have time and time again when, all those years of, not that it still isn't the case, but all those years that Tiger Woods was missing tournaments in the early stages of that back injury, when it looked like, when there were people that still believed he was going to continue to win and maybe win more majors, win more tournaments. If you happen to be in the minority of people that still think that could happen, I don't. But no Tiger Woods, no Dustin Johnson, maybe. Just as a golf fan, does that diminish the experience of this particular week's Masters for you, Pat?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I had a lot of support behind Dustin on any of my DraftKings teams, but he's a guy that I like. I like to see him go and compete for the green jacket. And as a fan, as someone who likes watching, if we could somehow get a Spieth Dustin or a Dustin Rory showdown come Sunday, that would be it. I mean, we're looking for someone to step up and be the star Tiger was. Is anyone ever going to be that big of a star again? Probably not. but someone can be bigger than all the guys right now. It's like we're dealing with the big four and then the big three, and like, oh, Ricky wins, it's a big five, and oh, here's Hideki. It's just one guy needs to separate himself from the pack, and Dustin looked like he was the guy who was about to do that. So this is kind of a bummer for all golf fans everywhere.
Yeah, it's definitely going to put a tiny bit of an asterisk beside the event.
No, it's not. That's not true. You win the Masters, you win the Masters.
Fair enough. But from the perspective you're talking about, we're not going to get the showdown that we wanted, because Dustin has been so dominant the first half of, or the first part of 2017, that, you know, you wanted to see whoever's going to win this event, that they beat Dustin straight up. And I think that would have made it a little bit more significant, just better to watch, because I really didn't see Dustin not being involved in the leaderboard at some point. So doesn't diminish the, you know, like Pat said, he's right. It's still the Masters, but just from a viewing perspective, it'll take away a little bit.
Good fight, good night there, huh, Geoff? All right, let's go to our questions. And I know people have been weighing in with the hashtag DKTV and leaving their comments on the YouTube page as well. Let's see our first one. We'll let Geoff tackle it first as well. Ryan Hart, is Henrik Stenson a viable option given his recent play? What do you think?
Okay, yeah. I mean, we touched on Stenson already. Look, I'm talking like maybe one or two if you're making like 100 lineups. Don't use him in cash games. Don't use him if you're only making one or two lineups this week. He's just been playing too bad. I think Henrik Stenson's a great player, but not for me this week. Not at all.
I'm with Geoff. I'm not using Henrik Stenson.
All right, quick and to the point. Let's go to our next question here, see what we have. Believe me, it's coming. There it is. Dylan, how long can we go with DJ ownership? Pat.
How low can we go? Like I said, I still think it's going to be somewhere around the 5% range. And for me, I'm going 0, so that's still way more than I would want. But like I mentioned off the top, I think there's people that aren't even going to see this news, made lineups on Monday, or just, you know, that's what's going to happen. I already talked about, like, I think that Tiger is going to have ownership, which is ludicrous because, you know, he's not playing. But with Dustin, people will hold out hope. There's the game theorist out there that will just say, you know what, I'm okay with writing off these lineups if he withdraws, so I'm going to go with him anyway, and maybe Dustin's okay all of a sudden. Maybe the #1 player in the world shows up and I get him at 5%. There's enough of those people out there that his ownership won't drop down to the 1-2%. It'll be somewhere between, let's say, 4 and 8%.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be closer to 8%. I think it might even hit 10. I mean, I think there's going to be the people who just don't change their lineups from Monday. The people who fall asleep tonight are like, I'm too lazy to wake up and change it. And then there's going to be, like Pat said, the game theorists who just want to take that chance anyway. So I still think he might hit double digits. He might hit 10%. Like I said, I'm fine completely fading him now, but I won't be shocked if he's still sort of well owned.
All right, let's go to our next spotlight, fellas. We are down to our last about 5 minutes of this program. Get your questions in with the hashtag DKTV. You can use YouTube as well. Leave them right there in the comments section. This next spotlight is Fantasy Golf Millionaire Targets. And we'll show you some of the names right here. You know, guys that some we've already talked about: Alex Noren, Brooks Koepka, Charlie Hoffman, Kevin Kisner, and Tommy Fleetwood Mac over here as well, from all around, and you know, reasonably priced in some cases as well. Let's you know, fire this off to you here, Pat, first. What are you looking for, really, in your potential Millie Maker targets? I mean, is it great putting, good recent form, distance off the tee? What's a key stat you might focus on?
I want to focus on scoring. I do like that around the green number, especially for the first 2 days, and the bogey avoidance numbers for a lot of these guys. For, like I said, for the first 2 days when the weather is up, but the conditions are fine, I need scores. So I need these guys to be pretty good around the greens, but also solid off the tee as we go. So Alex Noren, I'm not really feeling right now. I already mentioned I'm not playing Brooks Koepka. You can all have 100% Brooks Koepka if you want, just not for me with the way he's been playing. I love Charlie Hoffman. Charlie Hoffman has these greens figured out. For a guy that's not really all that good of a putter, he's got it going here. And he's still excellent tee to green, and he's trending up in the right direction. The only thing that may hamper him is he's a part of that PM draw, and if it gets too windy, he could just get clobbered down with the storm. But I still like him. He's a guy I'm using. I love Kevin Kisner. Kevin Kisner is going to be one of my top plays, but he's going to be pretty chalky. Down at the bottom, probably 15 to 20% ownership on him. Tommy Fleetwood, I really like. If you want to get off of Kisner, get off of Hadwin, who are both going to be highly owned, I don't think that Tommy Fleetwood is going to be unowned, but he'll probably have half the ownership. And he is the sort of player that can come out of nowhere and win this. Only because the putter can get hot. We've seen him already this season play in just putrid conditions over in Dubai and really play well through them all, fending off Dustin Johnson, out of all people, for a win over there. So he is a guy whose putter can get hot at the right time. He's also a big blow-up guy, though. So he's a very high-risk, high-reward player. And I will throw in Ross Fisher into this range, too, who's also $6,900, a British player, a guy that I'm really focusing on here this week.
Geoff?
Yeah, I kind of on the same page as Pat. I think I wait a little bit more recent form when I'm looking for potential value plays or Millie Maker targets, who might be lower owned this week. That's kind of why I like Tommy Fleetwood as well, coming in with really good recent form. He doesn't have the court experience, but he's a really good ball striker, and he's been playing well since the start of 2017. I like Alex Noren personally. Won 4 times over in Europe. He's got a lot of experience, great short game. Really, really good player in bad weather, too. Won the Scottish Open last year in poor weather. So that kind of fits all the factors for me. I think he's going to be extremely low owned just because he doesn't have that experience factor. But Alex Noren, top 20 player in the world, I think top 15 player in the world. I know it's his first time, but he's a player for the Millie Maker, under 5% owned most likely, that I could definitely get behind. Does have the afternoon draw too, but again, I think the weather's going to be bad for everyone. So Alex Noren, the guy who can get it done in bad weather anyways.
Pat, do you weigh the recent wins of guys like, whether it's Noren, whether it's Fleetwood, guys who have had so much success on the Euro Tour? Is it something of an anomaly because, it happened over there? Is it something that you actually put real credence in when it comes to this tournament, playing in the PGA, obviously at the Masters?
Yeah, I think winning is winning, regardless of where it is. I mean, you need to be able to close out whoever you're playing with. There's always pressure. Now, this is the biggest stage, but this is one of the reasons that we ended up on Danny Willett last year. Like, the guy could win overseas. The guy won in good fields overseas. He can close if it comes down to it. And I think that these guys can as well. Like I said, I prefer Fleetwood to Noren. I'm not really big on Noren because I don't like where his form is at right now compared to someone like Tommy Fleetwood or Tyrrell Hatton, who they've been playing much better over the past 2 months. And that's kind of what I want to see, because there's a big adjustment coming over from Europe to the United States. You want to see a nice finish or two from these European players once they get over. And I just haven't seen that from Noren yet.
Yeah, definitely weigh the wins the same for me. And a couple other Euros we haven't thrown out. Good call on Tyrrell Hatton. We haven't even talked about him. He's coming in with one of the best records of anyone in this event. But Bernd Wiesberger's made the cut here the past 2 years, been playing really consistent in 2017. Martin Keimer hasn't missed a cut.
Pass on Keimer. The guy can't chip.
He can't chip, but he hasn't missed a cut in over a year. And hey, you want a potential Millie Maker target? He's going to be completely loaned. Guy's a 2-time major winner. I'll have a little piece of Martin Keimer.
I'll prefer Martin Keimer at the U.S. Open and the PGA Championship and the British Open. Like him, Brendan Grace, just cross them off your list. Go with like Kevin Na or Brendan Steele or Charlie Hoffman or Mark Leishman. Like those are the guys I'm going at. My super sleeper for you. We got Scott Piercy coming in. He gets a good draw. The guy plays really well in the weather, and he can get hot with the best of them. And he loves playing at this course. He's going to blow up probably one of these rounds, but he's going to make enough birdies to survive at least, I think, the first 2 days, and we'll see how it shakes out from there.
Okay, I'm calling it right now that Sean O'Hare is going to beat Scott Piercy.
Oh, we need to come up with something for this because Sean O'Hare is definitely losing to Scott Piercy. What are the chances Sean O'Hare withdraws? Oh, I hurt my neck. I can't play. I'm playing poorly. I won't play anymore.
Well, you guys are going to have to come up with something on the line here, right?
Well,
I would think, maybe. I'll let you guys hash that out on Twitter. All right. Speaking of Twitter, last call for questions. We're only going to be here with you a few more minutes. Hashtag DKTV, or, of course, you can use YouTube. Leave it in the comments section. We'll get it to our analyst, helping you set your lineups for the Masters. Begins tomorrow at Augusta. A lot of good information here. Beauty of this, unlike a traditional pre-lock live that we've done for NBA or obviously Major League Baseball now, is that you don't have to decide in the final couple moments of this show. If you missed anything in this program, you can go back on YouTube, rewatch, fill yourself in, educate yourself in the run-up to tomorrow and setting those lineups. With the 6 golfers, $50,000 to spend. Let's take a look at another question here. See who we got. Alex Jankowski. Alex, usually you're part of the baseball show. You do some afternoon stuff. The basketball program, you may or may not have done football. I don't even remember. I have to believe on a Wednesday evening you have something better to do than to try and force yourself upon the golf show. But I'm kidding. It's good to have you. Excuse me. Let's take a look at the question here. How do you weigh Jason Day's emotions or lack of preparation when deciding to roster him? Of course, for anyone that missed it, Day not coming off a good tournament as for a very good reason. His mom with cancer, he withdrew early, and so, factoring that in, it is significant, Geoff. How do you look at Jason Day?
I like Jason Day this week. He's coming in with no pressure. I mean, we saw the same thing at the PGA Championship last year. He was sick or something. He got no practice time in. Everyone's like, don't play Jason Day. He finished second and just about won the tournament. So, with no Dustin Johnson and weather up in the air, I think he's just coming in with no pressure, no expectations. And that's kind of when you want to play a guy like him. So I'm on him.
Pat?
Yeah, I'm on him as well. I don't have max exposure or anything like that, but I'll have more than the field's going to have just because a player of his skill level now, especially potentially without Dustin Johnson around, it makes the path for him winning much easier. And you want to have exposure to anyone that possibly you think can win. And Jason Day is one of those guys. So I'm in on Jason Day. But to answer the question of how is the emotions going to affect him, I don't know. No one knows. He probably doesn't know. That's such an ineffable thing to try to explain. So yes, I'm not even going to try to do it. Do I like Jason Day? Do his skills match his course? Yes, I'll play him.
All right, last question of the night. What do we have? Let's see, it's coming. There. No, it's not Alex again. Alex, a second question? I'm kidding. It's not yours. Here it is. George Payne. Perfect. Exactly what I was going to ask you guys before we signed off anyway, so thank you, George. Can y'all pick a winner? Geoff, go first.
I should have worn my victory orange shirt because my winner's Ricky Fowler.
I'm surprised you didn't pick Sean O'Hare. My pick, like I mentioned off the top, I'm picking Jordan Spieth to win. I think he gets the revenge demons all out of his system here, and without Dustin, his path is a little bit easier. So it's Jordan Spieth for me. And if you're going to go with someone a bit lower on that list, it's a Louis Oosthuizen in your life. He's a pretty good player.
I'm surprised that neither of you is wearing a true Masters green. I know Pat has a shade of green on, I guess, but doesn't look nearly as good as the petals on the screen behind me here. How about Ultimate Jay Brennan with the graphic work? Terrific job by Jay. All right. This has been a lot of fun over the last hour. Now, thanks to everyone for joining us for this Masters edition of Pre-Lock Live. We'll reconvene with our new baseball program Friday night. That's 6 o'clock Eastern. In the meantime, make sure you get excited for golf. Check out the Daily Fantasy Edge Masters podcast. It's available on the DK Playbook and iTunes for some great information. Features some of our other analysts as well. And as always, you can keep it locked into DKTV to hear more from Pat and Geoff. Fellas, great stuff as always. Great research, great work, and look forward to seeing how you guys do.
Hopefully well.
Yeah.
All right, to all of you watching at home, good luck. Don't forget to wear your green this week. And don't forget about weekend golf, just in case the next couple of days don't go so well for you. I'm Adam. Talk to you soon.